Hi and welcome back. In this lab, we will see how to configure VPC peering. So in this example, I have two VPCs. So one is VDA-VPC. So this is the address range 10.125.0.0/16. And I have one more VPC which is production VPC. The IP address range is 10.0.0/23. So I have deployed two virtual machines, one in VDA VPC and another one is production VPC. So if I go to my EC2 instance, so as you can see, demo-VPC, which is deployed in my VDA-VPC, and the another one is which is so DC, which is deployed in the another VPC. So as you can see here, so this is in a production VDA subnet which belongs to 10.0.0.0/23, and I have my demo VM which is in 10.125.0.0. So the subnet is production VDA subnet. So this is the IP address. So now I have logged into both the VMs, demo-VM as well as DC. So if I go to the IP address blade of this particular VM, we can see the IP address belongs to this. So as you can see, IP address is 10.125.1.83. Similarly, I will try to log into the another one, so which is my DC. So let's see what is the IP address of this particular VM. So which is 10.0.0 slash, which is 10.0.0/60. So if I try to ping to this particular VM from my DC, let's see what is the default behavior. So as you can see, it is not pinging. So similarly, I'll try to ping from my demo VM. As you can see, it is not able to communicate each other because these two VMs are in a different VPCs. So by default, there is no communication between the VPCs. Now we are going to perform the VPC peering and we will see the behavior. So to configure VPC peering, we need to go to the VPC blade. So we are in the VPC blade already. So here we will see an option called VPC peering. So we need to go to the VPC blade, and here we'll have an option called VPC connections. So let's hit on this VPC connection. As of now, there is no VPC peering connection configured. So let's try to create the VPC peering. So I'm going to name it as my VPC peering. So here we need to select the VPC from which you wanted to establish the connection. So I will take an example. So I'll select VDA-VPC. So this is the address range of VPC, and now I will select the another VPC to which I am establishing the connection. So when we are doing the VPC peering, either we can do a VPC peering within the AWS account, or we can also do a VPC peering with different account as well. So in this example, I'm going to do a VPC peering within my account. So I'm choosing my account. If you have a VPC which is residing in another account, then you need to choose another account. So similarly, region. So it will ask on which region you have your destination VPC. So if it is a same region, you can leave as it is, or if it is in a different region, for example, let's say if it is in a US or UK, wherever, so then you need to choose the different region. In this example, my both VPC resides in North Virginia, so I will select this region only. So now this is very important, VPC ID. So now we need to select the another VPC which to which we are going to establish the connections in this lab. So my another VPC is production VPC. So I'm establishing the connection between new VDA VPC and production VPC. So VDA VPC, which I already selected as a requester in the top. Now I need to select the target or destination VPC, which is production VPC. So this is the address range of the production VPC. So once you selected all these things, now we can click on create peering connection. So it will take a while and it will create a VPC peering connection. So once you create a VPC peering connection, you will get a message saying that pending acceptance. So whenever you create any VPC, you will get a prompt to say that you have to accept the VPC peering. Otherwise, anybody can create VPC connection with any VPC across the AWS cloud. So to avoid this conflict, you have to accept the VPC peering in the target VPC. So as you can see here, you can accept or reject the peering connection request using action menu. You have until Monday. So within this time, you have to accept the connection. So if you go back to your VPC connections, so here it will display the VPC connection details. So this is my VPC peering, which is the name, and this is the connection ID. Here the status showing that pending acceptance. So it will show the requester VPC and the acceptor VPC. So these are the details. So you have to go to the action menu and then you need to select the accept request. If you do not want to accept the request, you can simply reject it. But in this case, I'm going to accept the connections. So I will click on accept request and it will establish the VPN connection. Now it will establish the VPC connection. So now it will say the VPC peering status is active. So if you refresh it, it will stay as it is. So once you have this VPC connections, if you go to your virtual machines and if you try to see the ping response, still you can see the ping is timed out. So even if you go to the another VM, which is my DC VM, and if you try to put a continuous ping, still it says timed out. So still the connectivity is not established. So the reason for this is, if you go to my whiteboard, so earlier we had a VPC here, which is VPC VDA, and another VPC which is prod VDA VPC. So now we have a VM here as well as VM here. So we established the VPC connection. So technically it should allow inbound and outbound connectivity. However, it is not able to communicate. The reason because there is a route table attached to each VPC. So now we need to add a entry in the route table saying that any traffic to this particular VPC, which is 10.0.0.0/23, it should go to my peering connection. So similarly, in this route table, we have to add an entry saying that any traffic which is going to my another VPC, which is 10.125.0.0/23, it should go to my peering. So we need to add this entry in our routing table. So once we have this entry in the routing table, then there is one more setting which is a security group. So as I mentioned earlier in the chapter, each VPC comes with the own security group. So we need to add a security group rule as well, saying that any traffic to another network which is 10.125, it should allow. Similarly, here in this security group also, we need to whitelist the peering VPC address. So in short, once you have the VPC peering connection, first we need to modify the route table and add the necessary routes. Second is we need to whitelist in the security group. So let's go to the portal and let's create the route entry. So I'll go to my route table. As you see, we can have, as you can see, we have a custom route table which is attached to my primary VPC, which is this one. So in order to add a route table entry, first we need to go to the route table blade. So here we need to identify what are the route table we created for our subnets or VPCs. So this is one of my route table which is custom -rt. Currently it is associated with 10.125.1.0/24 subnet, which belongs to this particular VM, which is demo VM. So here I need to add an entry. So let's go to the route table and I'll go to the edit routes and I will enter a route over here saying that 10.0.0.0/23 if any traffic from my subnet want to talk to 10.0.0/23, then it should go to the peering connection. So let's select the peering connection and we will save the configuration. So now we have completed this particular part, which is this one. So here we modified and we said that any entry to 10.0.0, it should go to the peering connection. Similarly, in the another VPC where we have another route table, we need to add this particular IP address so that it can get to know if I wanted to communicate here, it should use this routing table or routing entry. So let's go to that particular route table. So my another route table, which is associated with this particular virtual machine, which is DC. So this is the one. So if I go to my subnet association, you can see here that this particular subnet, which belongs to my another subnet in the another VPC where I have my DC VM. So I have to add a route entry over here as well. So to do that, I will select this route and I will go to the edit, and then I will enter a route saying that 10.125.0.0/23. It should go to my peering connection, and I will select the peering and I will click on save connection. So now both the side we have modified the routes and we have added the necessary routes. Now we need to add necessary rules in the security group. So if I go to my virtual machine, which is demo-vm, so under security, this is the security group I'm using. So I need to select this security group, and here under inbound rule, I need to enter a details. So this is my security group which I use for the virtual machine, which is demo-vda. So if I look into the inbound rule, so I have a rule which already I added where I mentioned that source is internet or any. So it means it will cover everything. So which I already allowed. So if I go to outbound rule, here also I have allowed all the traffic. As you can see, all traffic to anywhere. So both inbound and outbound rule, we have a rule which allows traffic to the incoming as well as traffic to the outbound. So we no need to add any rules as of now here. So if I go to the another security group which is attached to my DC, and we will verify the rules over there. So this is the DC, and if I go to the security and if I go to the demo-sg security rule, so if I check the inbound rule, so I have an inbound rule saying that any traffic which is allowed here as well. So if I go to the outbound also, I have a rule saying that any traffic outside this particular security group which is allowed. So now we no need to add anything because both inbound and outbound we have a rule saying that all the traffic is allowed. So if you do not have this rule, then you need to add a rule saying that traffic to the other VPC peering network should be allowed. So you need to enter the IP address details range over here. So in this case, I'm allowing everything. So you no need to. In this case, I already have a rule to allow everything. So you no need to do anything here. So now if you go to your virtual machine, and we will see what is the behavior of our connectivity. So I'm going to the demo VM. So as you can see in the demo VM, I'm able to access or I'm able to connect to another virtual machines. Similarly, if I go to my another VM, which is a DC, so here also the connection is established. I'm able to connect to my 10.125.1.83 virtual machines. So this is how you can establish a connection across VPC using VPC peering. So, however, sometimes you may come across some issues while doing the ping test. So, you may have to allow that in the firewall. So if you go to the firewall and if you right click and if you go to the properties, so you make sure that inbound connection is mentioned as allow here, similarly to the private as well as public. So you make sure that you allow all the inbound connections in both the VM, then you can see this particular ICMP connection will get succeeded. Otherwise it will fail because of the local operating system firewall rules. So this is the brief about VPC peering and how you can connect across the VPCs.